All right, so let's go over some basic academic vocabulary for our lesson on functions. So, we were taught functions last year, and it is the same thing for the first day. It's just identifying functions. And functions, remember, think about it like a vending machine. If you were wanting a bag of Takis and it was um, A1. When you push A1, what do you expect to get out? You expect to get Takis out. Well, what if there was another A1 and it was a different item? It was a granola bar. If you pushed A1, you would expect to get Takis out. But if there's another output that has a different, you know, number or a different food, what if you got the granola instead of the Takis you wanted? That would be a broken function. That just wouldn't be a functioning vending machine. So let's go into a little bit of vocabulary, and then from there, we're going to look at our first I do. So ordered pairs. We've been working with ordered pairs for, I don't know, 3 years now. Remember, ordered pairs just look like this. They're parentheses, and then we have an X value and a Y value. Remember, X always goes first. Think about the alphabet. If you say the alphabet, X comes before Y, and same in our ordered pairs. A relation, just think of that, you know the word relation. So it works with something, right? So think of a relation, it's kind of like being married. Uh, it's married, they work together for something. A function, we just talked about a function. Y'all know what a function is. It is something that has one input for every output. Domain, well, those are our inputs, and another word for inputs are x values. And range would be our outputs, which would be our y. Now, let's talk about the input. Well, the input is just our x values. It's something that you put into the function, and then our outputs are what we get out, which would be our range. So again, it's kind of the same thing, right? They're very parallel words. They mean the same thing. Independent, it would be um, a number that doesn't depend on anything. So think about being an independent person. Um, it doesn't rely. So if the input would come in, it works with everything. It's very independent, and then it comes out with the output. So the independent would be our inputs or our x values. And our dependent would be our outputs because our output is dependent on what we put in. So if I say I want the number one, well, that one is independent. And then whatever we get on that output is dependent on that number or the input we had. So let's go ahead and take a look at our I do. So a relationship has an input value with it corresponding to an output value. All right, so that's just a fancy way of saying for every x value, there's exactly one y value. For one specific domain, there's one specific range. Each input value has one and only one output value. That relationship is a function. Let's determine if these are functions or not. Well, going based off if on our interactive journal, if you already watched that pre-teach about functions, you should know how we're solving for functions. And even just think about last year in your seventh pre-AP class. How did we find functions? Well, if we're ever looking at a table, we need to cross out our outputs. So we need to we need to X out our outputs, which are also our y values. We want to cross out these y values right here. Next, we need to check if our x values repeat. If our x values repeat, then it's not going to be a function because for every one input, there needs to be exactly one output. So here we have a 0, a 1, a 4, and a 1. Well, did we have numbers repeating? Yes. We have 1, 8, and 1, 9. So think about that. Oh, I'm sorry, that's a 6. Sorry, 1, 1, 6. So think about that. If I wanted, let's think about this like a menu at a fast food restaurant. If I wanted a number 1, let's say that's chicken nuggets. Chicken nuggets. Well, if I ask them a number 1 in this table here, well, this is a number 6 too. So this could mean also a burger. Does that make sense? Can I order one thing and it be two separate things? No. Can an athlete play the same sport like LeBron James? Can he play for the LA Lakers and the Miami Heat at the same time? No, he couldn't. So these functions, you don't want anything repeating. So if LeBron James was the input, the output would be the LA Lakers right now. So how about a graph? So a graph, we have a very specific test that we run. It's called the vertical line test. And we know vertical lines because we've dealt with graphs before. A vertical line just is a straight up and down line. So think of a vertical jumping up and down. Well, when you do that vertical line test, all you have to do is now look at the graph. So here's my graph right here. Oh, here's this right here. How many times does this red line intersect the green line? Well, it intersects right here and right here. If it touches 2 times, it is not a function. Not a function. Well, why? Well, I'll also write this. Remember, this was a non-function either. Well, why is this one not a function? Well, look at this x value right here. That x value right there is 2. So this is saying 2 is positive 2, and 2 is also negative 2. So if we wrote this out in ordered pairs, if we cross out our y's, our x's repeat, right? So this is why this is not a function. Now let's look at this one. Well, ordered pairs are just like tables. Remember, ordered pairs, here's my x's, and here's my y's. Same thing. We are going to cross out our y's. Cross them out. Cross out. Next, all we have to do is see if our x's repeat. 1, 2, 3, negative 4, 1/2. None of these repeated. This is a function. Now, what about mapping? Mapping is very similar to an ordered pair or a table. You can table this out, or we can look for specific lines. And what I'm saying is all we need to do is count the lines coming out of our inputs. Remember, our inputs are going to be on the left, and our outputs are right here. We want to make sure there is one line coming out of each input. Well, here's 2 right here. You see these 2 lines right here? This is saying negative 3 is 2, the negative 3 input is 2, and the negative 3 input is 8. We only want one line coming out of there. So this automatically is not a function. From looking at this, everything else has one line coming out of it or 0 lines coming out of it. If it's only one line for every single input, it's perfectly fine. Now here we have 2 lines coming out of that negative 3. And again, if we wanted to cross out our y's, we see those negative 3's repeat. So if you ever see a line like this coming out of the input to the output, it is not going to be a function. Because this is saying this negative 3 has 2 answers. And for every one input, we need exactly one output. One input, one output. And for that point, that is the I do's for this first lesson. If you have any other questions, please ask your teacher.